Hey guys, it's Miss Avanchi. I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about the Cold War and what actually started the Cold War. Hopefully y'all have been working on your vocabulary and your maps and your containment paper and your Yalta conference paper. If you didn't get to the Yalta conference or the containment papers, please make sure you're working on that. The containment papers I did upload into Google Classroom today, so just make sure you're taking a look at that. So, containment. What actually is containment? Well, container. So let's think of this as a democracy. So the democratic nations, the United States, Great Britain, France, and then think about this water as the Soviet Union or communism. So the purpose of a container is to make sure that whatever is in the container stays in one place. So that was the whole thing about containment. They're wanting to make sure that communism stays in one place. In this case, it's going to be the Soviet Union and those 7 Eastern Bloc countries. But that's what containment is. There were a couple other documents or organizations that came about because of this. Also, the Truman Doctrine came about, the Marshall Plan came about. So the Truman Doctrine basically is a fancy name for containment. The Truman Doctrine, Harry Truman came up with it. And Harry Truman just said, we do not want communism to spread. So hence, there again, our little container of water communism. So George C. Marshall came up with a financial plan that said, if you agree to become democratic, or if you want to be democratic and you were previously communist, we will give you money to rebuild. So if you remember during World War II, everything was devastated. The buildings were blown up. All of the pastures were devastated. So George C. Marshall came up with this plan that said, if you're going to be democratic and you're going to try to contain communism to the Soviets, then we will give you money. Now, the money was based on how big your country was, how many soldiers you committed to World War II, but they would get money if they promised to be democratic. So once these two plans were in action, if you remember this map, so there came this thing called the Iron Curtain. So actually, Harry Truman also came up with that term. So the Iron Curtain is just an imaginary line that breaks up the eastern side and the western side of Europe. So anything in the east, in this case, red, and then there's one little yellow country. I know you can't see it because it's under my paper, but those are all going to be communist. So the Iron Curtain divided communism, and then the blue, which is going to be democratic. And there again, this is called the Iron Curtain. I mean, it's not a real curtain, but it was an imaginary line that divided it. And so once it was divided, we're also going to see that there were other things that came about. So when it was divided, it also split up East and West Germany. Hopefully you have done this, okay? So you will notice that East Germany is split up between the US, Great Britain, and France. And then East Germany is the Soviet Union. And then Berlin, which is a very small city inside that, was also split up into the US, France, and Great Britain, along with the Soviet Union. So this was Germany. It was split by the Iron Curtain, and it actually did become 2 separate countries. So then we also are going to see that there were 3 organizations that were formed. The first one was the UN, the United Nations. It was very much similar like the League of Nations. It was a peacekeeping organization. Unfortunately, the United Nations had 5 countries that could veto things: China, the US, the Soviet Union, France, and Great Britain. Because the United States and the Soviet Union were the superpowers of the Cold War, they could never agree on anything, so therefore the UN had a very hard time getting things passed that they wanted passed. Now, we also had NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So NATO is a military alliance between the democratic nations, and then the Warsaw Pact was in response to Germany splitting up, and they're also a military alliance, but the Warsaw Pact is going to be for communist countries. Now, containment in the Cold War lasted about 45 years. So for 45 years, NATO, Warsaw Pact fought each other. The United Nations, they only came in to help when it was 2 or more countries going on. But it was a very tense time because not only were the Warsaw Pact and the NATO countries arguing and fighting, but we're going to see an arms race begin. And we all know how the atomic bombs left Japan in devastation, and the nuclear weapons that we were building and that the Soviets were building were a lot worse. So I hope that helped understand. If you have any questions, let me know. And please make sure that you're working on your maps. And tomorrow we're going to have a couple other things in Google Classroom. And we're also going to be video chatting tomorrow. If you have any questions, let me know.